Hi, I'm Julia Noyes, your instructor for the oil painting class. What we're going to do today is get you ready to do project number 1. So we're going to go over some techniques and some ideas for you to already think about and try and practice. So first of all, this is my text number. Please use this when contacting me instead of email. Just say who you are and what class, because I teach other classes. It's quite simple. Texting is really fast and easy for me. So my name is Julia Noyes. It's like joyful noise, easy to remember. I have the Noyes Art Gallery in Lincoln. I'm a professional artist and painting is my big deal. So you can get online the syllabus for the class, and I'm not going to read it to you because you can read it and you can see the paints you need to buy. The one thing I always have students ask is, okay, what are we actually doing in this class? So for this class, 5 paintings will be required. So we're doing painting number 1 today, the still life. But there will be other paintings, a big variety of things, and the 5th painting will be the painting of your choice. So we're going to do a still life to start with, then a floral. We're going to do a cityscape. We're doing a piece of your choice, and still life, floral, landscape, cityscape, and piece of your choice. It could be an abstract or whatever you like. So you're going to get plenty of ideas on this. Don't worry about this class. It should be fun. Make it fun. I want it to be fun. Take a breath. Do not get concerned and stressed out about this. This is not the class for that. This is the class to have fun, to be creative, and not worry if everything's perfect. Nothing's perfect in painting. Nothing's perfect in life. We're just going to have fun, okay? So lesson number 1, get your syllabus. And what we're going to be doing is a still life to start with. So you can find an object that you love, whatever it could be. I mean, it can be a stuffed animal, it can be a vase, a container. When we say still life, it basically means something that's still. So it's not going to be a figure, it's not going to be your dog, it's going to be some object. So what you're going to do first is decide what kind of still life you want. So I'm going to have you actually take a picture and print it. So you're going to print it off, so this is going to be like your floor plan. So for this, these were just some things we had in the classroom, and I decided after I printed it, I don't want to do this whole background this way. I want to simplify, but it gives me a starting place. And I might want to enlarge this so I can see it a little better. So you can do that. You can go to the print shop, have it enlarged. It's not hard to do. And so then this is my rendition of this. So I'm simplifying it big time. I don't want all the details. And I enhance the color. So I'm being very creative. I'm not having this as the only thing I can do. I want to add to it. And so I'm using this complementary color scheme, blue against orange. This is actually pointing to this. So I'm thinking a more simple background, but having the eye lead to these paintbrushes in a container with a cup. And so I am thinking about an interesting composition. So with yours, it can be anything, but if it's only one little thing like this, this is really not enough. This would need more development. But you might pick to do one object. But somehow that object has to relate to the edges of your page. So it doesn't have to be complex. It can be very simple. A lot of times before I start a painting, I will do kind of test samples. Okay, I like this bottle, or this combination. Do I like those? How would I change it to make it better? So you can test things. You can use inexpensive. This is just canvas board. So we call this canvas board. It's canvas wrapped around a little board. They're very inexpensive. And you could paint on these if you wanted to. For this class, I've suggested canvas because it's more professional and it's actually, I think, really more fun to use, but up to you. lot of things that maybe you see, maybe your parents or you have something in the attic that might be fun to use. So you could think about, oh, this interests me, but what is it? Is it the shape? Is it the color? You know, this is a pretty complex shape. So is this enough, or do I want to add more to it? So as I'm painting, I think, okay, I want to make more reds into this copper. It's good. Be creative. It doesn't have to only be copper color because that's too boring just to have it copper. You can buy paint that's actually called copper oil paint, but it doesn't have much variety to it. So let's say, for example, you took a photo of this and you had it printed off. That would be an idea. You might be thought, oh, I don't like all of that background. I'm going to make it more simple. That's good. Over here, these are some still life items we have in class. This is kind of interesting. Oh, I think I'll do this. This is going to be my plan. I'm not going to make it exactly like this, but I even like it small. And so if this is what you want, what I'm going to have you actually do next, and this is not cheating, I'm going to actually have you cut it out. So you're going to cut out the shape, and I'm going to use a little canvas, and I've already painted a background. So this makes it more intimate. It's this, you know, it's filling up the page. I don't want a canvas that's this big if I'm doing something this small. Or if I do, then I have to have more things or other things around it to make it more interesting. But this could be step number one. So you take a photo, you get it printed off, and you decide, now if this is too little, I have a bigger canvas I want to use, I could simply enlarge this. So this is something I want you to already be thinking about for the still life. It can be anything you want. Don't ask me if it can be grapes. It can be grapes. It can be anything you want. So it needs to be something that you like. I want it to be appealing for you. Now, one of the things when we do still lifes, often I will have someone say they're going to have a simple shape like this. And they put it on their canvas and they paint around it. And then 5 hours later, it's like, that shape isn't right. Something's wrong with it. And almost all the time, the problem is you might not get this side to match that side. And the reason is our mind doesn't really, sometimes we get this wonky. So what I would suggest, I've developed this idea that you actually draw it on a piece of paper and you fold it in half and you make sure both halves match. And then you put that on your canvas. So I know that this side is going to match this. So it's really worth the 10 minutes it takes to put this on a piece of paper. It becomes your template, so you know that this is going to match. Or you can see if something's off right away. Instead of spending 5 hours on this and then it's like, oh, that container doesn't look right. So what I would suggest you do, just on some paper, you can fold the paper in half, and you could even hold the paper up to the shape and say, okay, so if this is my halfway line, my axis line, and I really want to do a shape that's similar to this, I could even mark my halfway spots on this. So for example, this piece, I could actually, and it's not this container, but I could actually hold it up to the container and kind of guess to start with, folding that over, cutting it out and opening it up and say, oh, I do like that shape. Or that isn't the shape I want something taller, I want something bigger, whatever it is. This planning part is very important because later that shape is the most important shape. Your object in the painting is going to be the most important shape. Then I'm going to show you how to blend this. So you can blend it smooth, you can blend it rough, you can add highlights, you can do an ellipse. The ellipse is this part, and that's the same as we want this side of the ellipse to match this side of the ellipse. This ellipse needs to match the back ellipse. So everything matches. When an object is the same on all sides, it really needs to match this side, needs to match that side. So that is good practice, and we're going to be actually doing that in class so you can actually see how to simply make a template. It's not very hard, especially when you're picking simple shapes. So for materials, I want you to see the materials that you're going to be using. We're going to use turpenoid, and so this is odorless. It's like turpentine, so it's a paint thinner. And we don't put this on the sink, we don't put it in the garbage can, we dispose of it in, we have a toxic bucket, we call it our toxic bucket. So when this gets really dirty and you can't use it anymore, we throw it in our toxic bucket and then we dispose of it properly. So when you get your turpenoid, and you'll end up needing a bottle at least this size in class because we're going to be doing 5 paintings, get 2 little containers that are glass, and pour some turpenoid in. It doesn't take very much. And this is our paint thinner, because with oil paint, we use paint thinner, turpenoid. So with other kinds of paints, like acrylics or watercolor, we use water. But oils don't work with water, they work with turpentine. So the sheet that you are going to work on before you even get started on your idea, you will have a technique sheet, and this will be online. And you're going to be doing these 6 techniques. So I'm going to demonstrate those right now. The first one, you will learn, and this takes a little practice, but with a brush, you're going to go from dark to light. And when you're doing this, it just takes a little practice. So we're going to use some different brushes, depending on what you want. A palette knife, a brush, all of these are going to give different effects. This is a palette knife. I love these. It has a different angle on it. Here's also a palette knife. These are great for blending. So to start with, I'm going to do some blending with this brush. You have some of these in your kit, or you can get brushes. It's a fairly stiff bristle brush. It's square across the top. It's a flat. And so I am going to, because this brush is very dry, I can feel that it's very dry, I'm going to do this first one. I'm going to dip into some orange paint. So I'm using this. This is some orange paint. You can use whatever color you want. This is called cadmium red light. It looks fairly orange, but they call it cadmium red light. So on our paper, we're going to start with our brush, putting our color down. Can you see that? Okay, so as we go across, I'm going to add a little more turpentine. So this is actually thinning it. But now I'm going to reach into some of my white, because I want to keep this side lighter. I'm going to put some white over here with my palette knife, and I'm going to start blending that white into the orange. You're going to want to have a rag and an apron, because this paint really gets on your clothes and it's hard to get out. So what I'm doing, I'm drying out my brush. It had a lot of turpentine in it and too much. So I'm going to blend this white over here to the edge. This is really good practice because you'll be using this technique the whole semester. So I'm slowly going into the orange, because that orange is darker than white. It's going to take over my white really fast. So then I'm going to let some more of that orange come over here, so it's taking over more of my white, so I can get this blended. See how I'm moving my brush back and forth to get this blended. So I want to keep this lighter over here. And now I'm going to add a little more of the Cad Red light to get a middle tone or a transition from dark to light. So this is going to be a little more darker, a little more blended. So with this technique, you're going back and forth, blending. Now this will be great for your still life because then you can blend and you can get these nice cylinders or nice shapes really blended. It doesn't take very long. Look, I've only been working on this a minute, and look how you can really get this blended. I would say the biggest problem with people who haven't used oil paints before is they have so much orange on their paint it takes over the white. So we don't want that to happen. We want to have some lights here, and I'm going to keep blending that. I might have to wipe off my brush if there's too much orange. Add a little more lights or whites over here. I keep blending it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until I get it as smooth as I want. So I'm going from light to dark, and I'm going dark to light. Now if I want this even wider over here, I can come back with even more white along this edge. So I can really get that blended, blended, blended. So you can see in a matter of just a few minutes, you can get this really blended, and I might even blend it some more. So this I'm blending with circles. This is blending with strokes going up and down. There's not a right or wrong. Either way works great. You can decide what works for you. The next one is blending with a knife. So instead of a brush, now we're going to use a palette knife. And if you don't have a palette knife, you could actually use a kitchen knife. You know, some of the paring knives that have an edge. So I'm going to be using the same idea. I'm going to be putting some orange over here with my palette knife. So with my palette knife, I can really just get right up to the edge. I can scooch right up to the edge. I'm going to move this around so I can really be a little more in control of my edge. You may wonder, well, why are we doing these sample sheets? I want to get on to painting. This is going to teach you how to do anything you want in this class. These first techniques are really vitally important because then you'll be able to do anything. You will see in this class you're going to learn to mix any color you want as long as you have the primary colors. This is going to teach you how to blend in many different ways. See how I'm using the front and back of my palette knife? And I'm putting quite a bit of paint on this, but then I'm thinning this out, and of course I can thin it with turpentine, or I'm going to go right now and get some of my white. I'm going to turn this paper so it's a little easier for me to reach from this side. Okay, I'm going here. Basically, we're doing the same thing we did with the brush, except we're doing it with a palette knife. So I'm going to go back and forth until I get the desired smoothness and blending that I wanted. See how I can turn my paper or canvas around? I'm painting right-handed, so I want to make this as easy as possible for me to see. Sometimes I see students painting an edge they can't see. Well, just simply turn the canvas around so it's to your advantage to see what you're doing. So I have quite a bit of white or light on this, which I like, and I can keep this very thick. But as you can see, this side is a lot lighter than that side. It's easier to take a light and make it dark than it is to take a dark and make it light. So I'm going to now pull some of that orange over, or if I have too much paint on my palette knife, I can simply scrape it off. But I'm not going to throw that paint away. I can use that. Now if I need it to make it nice and clean, because I'm now going to get into some of the orange, not a lot, but I want it along my whole edge, I can dip back into the orange, and now I'm bringing this orange across, bringing it across, bringing it across. And you can decide how much blending you want to do. Do you want to keep it really smooth? If you do, take another 5 minutes and keep blending. Do you want it to be more rough, like a brick wall or some kind of cement? It's still blended, but there's a rough surface. Then I'm not done blending, but you can start to see dark to light, how fast you can do this. So I can go up this way and pulling that paint across. The main idea for this is for you to learn how to do this so you're very comfortable throughout the semester, so you can blend, you can do anything you want. So don't give up. It just takes a few more minutes than maybe you think it should. But I'm going to stop there, but you get the idea. So from light to dark, using a palette knife. Now we're using Turpenoid or paint thinner, and we already did this in the first one, but what you can do on this, you can see how when you put paint down, you can also paint into it to make areas thinner or where that color doesn't show up as much. So you can put your color down. And feel free to use any color you want. It doesn't have to be this cad red light. For my two turpentines, I like to have one that's my dirty turpentine where I'm going to clean my brush, and one that I'm trying to keep for my cleaner turpentine when I want to start and do some clean things. So with this, I can now go in with my Turpenoid, and I can really water this down. I can get this paint really thin, and it creates a different look. And it's really fast because it provides that liquid for blending. There's a couple ways that we use turpentine. So right now, our Turpenoid is called many different things. But when you're using Turpenoid, you can use it to thin it. You can use it to clean your brush, because at the end we want to clean our brush, and the paint thinner is a great way to clean it. Soap and water are not enough. Really, Turpenoid is the way to clean your brush, first of all. But we can also use the Turpenoid to get certain effects. So we can now just add some of this, and it will even thin that design down more, and it creates a pattern with the Turpenoid. The next one is using thick paint with a knife. Well, that couldn't be easier, so we're going to do some thickness like this or like this. This is really getting the paint on thick. So what we want, certain times you want the paint to look really thick. You're doing a basket or part of your still life, the copper, whatever you want it on thick. So you're going to use a lot of paint. Put the paint on thick, and you can create patterns. But the idea is that we're actually seeing the paint as a surface, as a texture. So you can't be skimpy with this. You have to get the paints out and really use it. And it can be any color. So it creates a richness that is something we really like in oil painting. It's often that thickness, like Rembrandt. His paints get thicker and thicker and thicker as they came to a highlight. You can't do that any other way except piling the paint on. The next one is to blend a sphere to create roundness. So with this, we'll use our same paints. And I'm going to say that maybe this is going to be my highest spot here. Too much Turpenoid is getting really runny. So you just have to kind of wage that when you're doing it. If it's out of control, there's probably too much Turpenoid in it. And because you want to be able to control this, at this point, because we're doing a sphere, we're going to actually be making this look like it's very round. So I'm leaving a white spot. That's going to be my highlight or my lightest area. I'm not going to really keep it totally white. But I'm making circles around this. I'm turning my paper so I can actually see what I'm doing. So I'm scooching the brush up to the edge. And so we're going for this kind of look where it goes from dark to light. You can have your highlight wherever you want. It can be, this goes from dark to light. So the idea is to make it feel very round. So to do that, and I could use a different color. it doesn't have to just all be this red color. I could do blue as my darker color down here. The main thing is we want to have a variety. We want to really get some darks in here. So in your packet, if you have purchased the packet, you will have canvases of various sizes. Most of you will do more than 5 paintings in this class because you'll want to experiment and maybe you'll want to do some things for gifts or whatever. So start to think what canvas size is going to work the best for each of your projects. Of course, smaller canvases are easier and faster to do. You know, you might think, okay, the landscape project, maybe that should be a bigger canvas. And your last project, the project of your choice, so if you're going to do an abstract or you're going to do something really, I don't know, very creative, you might want a bigger canvas for that. See how I'm blending this darker to lighter, darker to lighter. Look how fast this works. I mean, really, in just a few minutes, you can get blending. Encourage yourself to be patient and think, okay, I just need to keep working a little bit more on this. Take your time. Take your time, take your time. I would say the biggest lesson is people don't know how much paint or how much turpentine is in their brush and not cleaning your brush enough. Because if I have a lot of that red, cadmium red, and now I'm going up to this highlight, it's going to take that over and I'm not going to be able to keep much of a highlight, just like we did in some of the others. So now I'm taking that white spot, which really had mainly white in my brush, and now I'm blending it out, blending it out, blending it out. Keep blending, keep blending, keep blending. I want to keep moving this around. And the reason that this is going to have a white or a highlight that's the circle is this is a sphere, it's circular in shape, so the highlights are going to reflect that shape. So if it's round, if your object is round, you're going to have a highlight that's also round. And across from the lightest light is going to be the darkest dark. So we want to keep that in mind. So I can just play around with this. Sometimes you might want to use a sponge. You can use different things depending on what effect you want. If you want it super smooth, you could even use a brush, a sable brush, a brush that's really soft, and you can do really, really soft blending. This is just a regular bristle brush. It's not particularly soft, and so the blending is just kind of average blending. It's not super soft, but it's not rough. Okay, look how quickly you can do this. So if you want something that's more dramatic, go darker darks and lighter lights. If you want something that's more subtle, this really doesn't hardly have a highlight at all. It could use more of a highlight. But when you're doing your painting, you can ask yourself those questions. Oh, does this need more of a highlight? So I want to show you some examples of different cylinders students have done. And so this goes from dark to light, and they're blending with vertical strokes, which is okay. I wish that this line were blended a little more. And then when you start to look at your objects, you will see when you look into them, the highlight is here, but often on the rim, the highlight's going to be up here. So you simply have to start to look and be aware. The dark is on this side, and here's even a cast shadow, and we'll talk more about those. But this is going to be the dark side of the rim. But all you have to do is look and ask yourself, okay, where is the light and where is the dark? Because in each situation, it's going to be slightly different. So that's blending vertically. This is blending very roughly, not trying to blend it out particularly. So, it comes down to what is your style. Here, the cast shadow is a little overwhelming. I wish there was a little less of this shadow to still show a little more of this form. This is blended with strokes going around it. Now inside here, this actually needs to be darker to balance this, because if we were looking inside this shape, this would be darker here. So I'm showing you these so you can start thinking about what you want for your object. So this is our little practice sheet, of course, so we have one more, because some of the objects you will be doing might be a cube, a square, a rectangle, some kind of shape. So I want to show you some ideas on painting a cube. And we're going to think about what side is going to be the lightest and what side is going to be the darkest. So we're going to paint these in three different ways, 3 different values. And what value means is the light or the dark. So if this is the lightest, then do we want this a little darker and this a lot darker? So if this is set up in a room and you take a photo of it, it's already going to tell you. And that's going to be the easiest, is to follow the print that you took. But on this, we can just make it up. So you could do whatever you wanted. So do you want the light on the top? Now this should be a little darker to give this more dimension, because this is light, this is kind of medium, but if this were darker, I'm just going to make this darker so you can see. And if this color isn't dark enough, I would even add some blue to it, or it could be black, it could be anything that's slightly darker. And you know what I'm going to do? I wanted to also tell you that on this palette knife, here's some blue too. If your tubes really are stuck, sometimes you can set them upside down in turpenoid and it will loosen it, or you can get one of these little handy pliers, because sometimes you can twist the lid off and you actually rip the tube. But I could add even some of this dark blue, because I'm making this cube however I want. And so I'm going to add some blue to this and really make this darker. So I'm going to assume this is a high contrast cube. There's going to be one area that's very light, one area that's very dark like this, and then we're going to do this a middle value. Because if you want something to really have dimension, you want it to really look like it has shapes, you have to have more contrast. So have some areas very dark, some areas very light, and some areas very in between. Look how already that now has a lot of dimension. It no longer looks flat. So if you find in your painting, oh, that just looks too flat, you need to either add some darks or some lights. And I could even make this lighter if we wanted to really contrast that more, which I'll do. I'll just add some light to the brush, the paint that I already have. So I'm working on this. This is called a little palette. It's a disposable palette. And they're quite easy to use. So I'm going to lighten this up even more. If I want to lighten it, it's going to have more white or something light on it. So I'm just using this quickly with my brush. And I'm not going to feel like I have to have every color exactly the color that I see in my still life. I want to be more creative. You know, if I want more red or I want more white, that's what I'm going to do. So these are the 6 techniques that we're going to focus on for our still life. None of them are very hard. They're the basics. So you could start to practice those. I do want to remind you on the turpenoid or turpentine when you clean your brushes. Very, very important. And we actually have you sign a safety sheet that says that you understand this. So we don't throw any of this down the sink. Never, ever, never, no way, don't. So when we are ready to clean our brush, I do this by habit. get all the paint that you can off first in a rag. You know, 80% of the paint will come off, your brush is almost clean. Then you can tip it into the turpentine, tip it, and then wipe it until it comes clean. So you can see here, it's almost cleaned off. I don't know, this paint rag, if you can actually see that almost all that paint is out. Then, once in a while, we will use soap and water to clean this a little bit. If you let your oils stay in your brush, it really is hard on your brush. We can always get it out. I've had students throw brushes away because they are hard and the paint is dried, but you can soak them for overnight or even for a couple days in vinegar, and it will soften up the brush. It's hard on the brush, but you can get it back where it's going to be usable. So now you've learned some things about a palette knife, you've learned some things about using a brush, you know how to use turpentine or turpenoid. Hopefully you now understand how you can go from dark to light and make it nice and smooth. You can go from dark to light with a palette knife and blend it in a more rough way. You can use paint thinner to clean your brush, to tone down or thin your water, your paint, or you can even use it like a water where you're watering it down and you can create some effects with it. And you've learned how to paint with very thick paint where you're piling it on with a palette knife, and you've learned how you can create a sphere very easily where you can really make it smooth and it feels very three-dimensional. You have learned how to do a cube, which this is very high contrast, dark against light. So these are going to be very helpful. So the first thing you're going to do is practice these before you start your painting, and then you're going to get your still life figured